Um, I hope all of you have been having a great conference so far. Today, I'm going to be talking about how PayPal uses artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, neural networks, etc., to combat fraud, to detect fraudsters, to mitigate the risk that is inherent in us being a payments platform, the world's biggest payment platform. So, let me start off with something. Someone, and we'll reveal who that is in a moment, someone said that the first trillionaire will be somebody who masters AI. Any guesses on who this is? Elon Musk? No? Somebody maybe not quite as inspiring. It's Mark Cuban. So those of you who watch Shark Tank would have seen him. So this is what he said. He said that the world's first trillionaire is going to be somebody who masters AI and all of its derivatives. And the reason we are seeing a lot of hype today, and some of it is justifiable, is because thanks to the availability of data, thanks to us being able to capture all the data that people leave as a digital trail as they lead their lives, and greater and greater horsepower in terms of computation, now you're able to actually do something interesting with that data, which is why AI is in the news so much today. Let me give you a few more vignettes, right? So the popular saying goes that data is the new oil, that is the new gold. But I'm going to differ from that. I actually don't think so. I don't think it's the new oil or the new gold because it differs from these. Yes, I agree, they're very, very precious to us as human beings. That it differs from these because it constantly keeps on increasing. The other two keep decreasing as humans continue to mine it or drill it, but data is something different. Every day it increases exponentially. If there was a different adjective, I'd use it. Here are some simple examples, right? And the deck was built a few months ago. I am confident that every single data point that you see here is outdated already. I am confident that everything that you see here is several percentage points more. Just to take an example from our own company, Venmo. So the slide here says over $2 billion of payment volume per month. 2 billion with a B. Well, in the time that has elapsed since we put the slide deck together, that payment volume per month, as of the quarter that just went by, is $4 billion per month. It's not 2, it's $4 billion. We just processed $12.3 billion in payment volume on Venmo in the last quarter. But regardless of the hype, there's so much hype around it. What we have to understand is that not everybody who says they're doing AI, quote unquote, is actually doing it. Brute force traversal of if-then-else statements that automates an existing process, I'm sorry, not AI, right? So how do we classify? Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are doing AI in your respective companies? You're all very, very honest, truthful people. The internet is filled with people not like you. A lot of people would have put their hands up, right? So I will classify into three broad categories. There are consumers, there are creators, and there are core AI companies. So let me build the slide out and let me talk about the story. So there was a Harley Davidson dealership in New York. A guy called Asaf Jacoby was leading this. It was his own dealership, and every week he was roughly selling very expensive bikes. He was roughly selling about 2 a week. And no matter what he tried, no matter what kinds of campaigns he tried on social media, on web properties, etc., he was not really seeing any significant uptake. So he was walking around on Central Park one day and happened to run into a guy called Or Shani, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Algorithms. They are a marketing AI platform. So they got talking, and this guy told him, hey, this is the problem I'm facing. I'm not seeing any significant uptick in sales. Apparently, there are a lot more people who can afford my bikes, but they're not turning up at my dealership. So the Algorithm CEO, Or Shani, said, hey, let me take a stab at it. Don't pay me anything right now. Let me try to see if I can do something. So what they did was, they looked at the existing CRM data, they analyzed it, they derived a lot of insights across different customer segments, particularly focusing on the high-value customers, and found that there were several similarities between the customers who had bought bikes until then. Then they took these insights and applied it across all the different marketing channels that were viable, social media included. That weekend, after this new marketing campaign came into effect, the dealership sold 18 bikes. In a quarter, they saw that their sales leads went up by 2,930%, simply because they were more focused on what they were getting. And fast forward another 6 months, the guy had to open a new center with a call center so that they could handle the volume of calls coming in. The dealership currently thriving very, very well. They are consumers of AI. This dealership was a consumer. The algorithms guy was a creator. And then you have the core AI companies where, for us to succeed, for us to exist, for us to thrive, PayPal included, AI is a fundamental aspect of what we do. We cannot survive, we cannot exist without it. And there are many other companies, Google, Facebook, etc., all of whom rely on AI in a similar fashion for their existence. And dare I say, given the context that we are in these days, if you overuse it or abuse it, maybe it's not existence that we are talking about anymore. There could be other problems in terms of regulation, etc. So it's a very powerful weapon. Nonetheless, we need to know how to use it. So why would you basically want to use AI? If you want something done faster, if you want to have something done more accurately, if you want something done more reliably, efficiently, effectively, something that's boring, something that's mundane, something that's repeatable, something that can scale, don't use a human for it. Send a machine for it so that the human beings can focus on more interesting things that require the specific skills that human beings have. So let me talk about how we as a company use AI, because we don't have any choice. Again, let me show you a few numbers to build a little bit of street cred for myself and for my company. These numbers, again, in full disclosure, they are outdated already. The recent quarter that the earnings call just happened yesterday, these are outdated. The numbers are higher than this, and they continue to grow higher, 30%, 20 to 30% year over year, every single year. It's a good business to be in. $450 billion of total payment volume processed through our systems. Just to put it in context, given that we are in India, that is close to 3 lakh crore Indian rupees per year processed through our payments engine. That, if you look at some of the most staggering numbers, 7.5 trillion database calls every quarter, 80 terabytes or more of data growth every week, every single week. So this is the kind of scale that we are talking about. So when so many transactions are happening every single second, it is implicit that we cannot solve any problem of fraud using just human insight. You need to rely on machine insight very, very heavily. So let me give you a little bit of a sense. Let me just build out this slide. So we have 3 levels of fraud detection. One at the transaction level, before a transaction happens, in the process of a transaction, during the transaction, and post-transaction. We are able to detect fraud in all of these 3 stages. And then there are account level fraud patterns. For example, if somebody is making some suspicious changes to their profile, if they're changing a lot of things around, then maybe that account is a fraudulent one. Or if there's a network level problem, if there are multiple accounts that seem to be collaborating with each other, money being transferred from one to the other, from one central account to multiple small accounts, etc., we're able to track fraud at that level as well. So if you look at how we've, what we've done, let me build out the slide again. So what we have is we run multiple model ensembles. Each of these model ensembles have several models, 30 to 40 variables, hundreds of features that we are looking at, thousands of features, and we need to be able to deliver a decision in milliseconds. Because when you're conducting a transaction, you don't want to wait for 5 minutes for the process to complete, because then you're going to leave it and go do something else, and then the merchant suffers. So it's important for us to not just weed out the bad guys, but also detect the good guys, so that you can have money moving into the hands of the good guys super fast while you keep kicking the bad guys out. And we pride ourselves on this ability very, very heavily, because for a payments platform that is processing $450 billion of TPV, our fraud loss rates are 0.28%. That is less than a third of 1% of our total payment volume is actually resulting in fraud. So that speaks to the effectiveness of this particular AI-based fraud engine that we have, right? So let me give you an example of how we do this. Let me take a specific example of something we call collusion fraud. The setup is simple. You've got a buyer and you've got a seller. So buyer purchases an item using PayPal from a seller, right? And then the seller supposedly ships this item to the buyer. The buyer says, hey, PayPal, I didn't get anything in the box. So one of the features that PayPal offers is buyer protection as well as seller protection. And just for your reference, PayPal is now in India as well, and we offer the same global features in India as well. So you have, as a buyer, have the ability to dispute a transaction for 180 days. If you find anything wrong, if the item you did not receive it at all, or if it was significantly not as described, you were looking for a blue shirt and what actually came was a pink shirt, or if you feel like your account has been taken over and somebody has done a fraudulent transaction on your behalf, you can go ahead and dispute it. Well, in this case, the buyer finds the box empty. What happens is, they complain to PayPal. Now PayPal refunds the buyer, right? So they say, oh, looks like you didn't get it at all. Show me the proof. The buyer says, hey, I didn't get anything. Fine. Now what happens on the seller side is, seller says, the PayPal says, hey, seller, the buyer is saying that they didn't receive it. Where's the proof that you sent it? The seller shows the proof, because the seller and the buyer are colluding. They both have an agreement with each other that, hey, listen, PayPal has this wonderful feature called buyer protection, and they also have seller protection. Let's make some money in the middle, right? Seller provides this proof. PayPal says, oh my God, what do we do now? We have to refund this to you because we have seller protection. Goes ahead and refunds the money. So who loses in the middle? PayPal loses. So if a lot of people start doing this, then clearly we as a viable business model don't exist anymore. Then we cannot offer these kinds of protections. The reason we are able to offer a protection like buyer protection and seller protection, 6 months, unheard of in most markets, including India. 6 months you've got the ability to dispute a transaction. Why are we able to confidently say that we can offer such a service? It's because behind the scenes we've got this amazing engine that allows us to figure out which ones are fraudulent and which ones are not. How many of you think that we are in the payments business? PayPal is in the payments business. Almost everybody will say that because I've been talking about it. But here is my take on it. We are not just in the payments business. We're in the trust business. Think about it. Sellers and buyers around the world buying and selling. No trust inherent in the system. The buyers and sellers don't even know each other. This is not your store around the corner of your house where you've known this person for decades. No. This is somebody in a different country that you have no reason to trust. The only intermediary in the middle that can instill trust in the system is us. And the reason we are able to do it so phenomenally well is because of the AI-based fraud detection engine that we have behind the scenes. So how do we do this? So before that, let me just give you a few more scenarios, right? Like this is not easy to solve, because what if there are many such people? What if some buyers do this only for transactions that are below a certain amount and not above a certain amount? What if buyers and sellers behave reasonably well with majority of the people and only in some cases they seem to do this fraud just to stay under the radar? It's not easy. It's not easy to detect, right? And it's never explicit. There's no way for you to tell right from the system that, oh, this is a fraudulent transaction, this one is not. You have to derive it. You have to sniff it out. And there's no single pattern to it saying this seller is always fraudulent. It's tough to arrive at that either, right? And then the buyer and seller, in some cases, they might conduct fraud with somebody and not with another person. So when the two fraudulent buyers and sellers come together, difficult to tell when that happens. So we use a technique called collaborative filtering with matrix factorization. So architecture is simple. Initially, what we do is we build a fraud model for both the buyer and the seller, and then we marry the two together. And how we do this is basically, let me just build it out and then I can talk about it. So originally when we started, as a payments company, PayPal has been around for 20 years now. 1998 is when we were founded. So we've got tons of data. So initially it was linear regression with 30 to 40 variables. Then we soon moved to neural networks. And now, at the scale that we operate in, we find that we have to be in deep learning. So we have a deep learning function that has 6 or more hidden layers. Each layer has several activation functions with around 600 neurons and 1,500 variables that we are constantly looking at, features that we are looking at. Now, if you are going to run a model across 6 different layers and find out whether a fraud is taking place or not, what happens? 1,500 features, if you're going to run it on every single transaction, you're going to take a lot of time. So you need to find a way to keep this computationally effective and efficient, because you need to not use up too much horsepower, not too much time, but you need to do this at scale. So we need to find the minimal subset of features that will give us the best area under the ROC curve, so that you can say that if you use this minimal subset of features, your confidence in the result that you're putting out is the highest, and you're able to do it in as short a period of time as possible, using the minimal amount of horsepower, CPU-wise, processing power-wise, as possible. So what we do is we build the two matrices for the buyer fraud model and the seller fraud model. We do a simple product between the two, and then we fix a row and a column and keep optimizing till we find the optimal matrix that collaborates the two together and says, this cell, this buyer and this seller combination will likely commit a fraud. And there's a confidence score that comes with it, saying that we are 80% sure that this will result in a fraudulent transaction. At that point, in the transaction, we can insert another check saying, okay, we need additional proof for your transaction to go through. Can we do this 100% accurately all the time? We are getting better and better at it. The challenge here is that our business is growing so fast that what used to take maybe 400 milliseconds before now has to be done in 250 milliseconds. And what has to be done in 250 milliseconds has a bigger problem because the data has grown so much more. 80 plus terabytes of data growth every week. I talked about it, right? So as our business grows, the SLAs get tighter and tighter, so the algorithms have to get more and more efficient. So we have a dedicated team of data scientists that we've built up, this AI team that we've built up from the ground. We contribute heavily to open source as well. Collusion fraud is just one example of the kinds of fraud. So when a transaction is happening, there are easily about 10, 15 different things that we need to check for. So since I'm running quickly out of time, let me just tell you. So we need lots of training data to be able to do this, and that's something that we have as a company that's existed for so long. So that's the good thing. So this is where deep learning really comes in, right? So we are able to do a lot of different things on patterns that we've never seen before that humans would not necessarily be able to detect. So we're able to do that because we use deep learning. Having said that, a few words of caution, right? Not everything needs the AI hammer. Not, when you have a hammer like AI, every nail looks like something that can be hammered. So you have to be careful to make sure that you don't start building solutions that are constantly in search of problems to solve. There are many such technologies that are in the hype curve today, right? There are lots of examples of such technologies. AI is one of them where it is probably overused, extremely well used in some cases, like the ones that I talked about, but also overused in many other cases. The other thing to look at is that AI gives you a lot of power, and with great power comes great responsibility. We've seen all the different angles in the news recently where data is being misused. Insights that AI has the power to give you is being misused. Now, as a company that handles a lot of personally identifiable information, we are among the most trusted companies in the world because we put a lot of care and attention to make sure that a buyer's information is never, ever, ever shared with the seller. So none of these insights are available to sellers, only what the buyer does, their personal information is not. Lastly, I think all this talk about AI is definitely doing one thing. It is crystallizing what it means to be a human being. You cannot replace, not yet at least, you cannot replace humans and humanity. Because aspects like emotional intelligence, generosity, mischief, envy, greed, fear, hate, good and bad, these are not things that can be reduced to patterns, that can be reduced to data, not yet at least. Maybe a day will come, but still, this quest for us to ascend the AI curve is definitely crystallizing what it means to be a human being. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure as always.